Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for November 26th, 2021. This is the day after American Thanksgiving, and we have a small group today. We might decide to cut the meeting short as well. I'm Benji Fisher, moderating and sharing my screen, and also on the meeting are Aaron McHale, Christina Chumillas, and Ralph Kohler. There are a few issues that we'd like to look at least briefly. And the first one is one that Ralph brought up, issue number 1259892. Users could not find the change password fields. And then related to that, issue 2883755, introduce a submit confirmation step modal to form API for usability. And Ralph, for the sake of the recording and for Aaron and Christina who missed our pre-discussion, could you say a few words about these two issues?
Yep, I could. As I said, I'm not really prepared. I just brought it up since you were asking for any possible topics for today. And it's a issue I was looking and following along for a while, and I still consider the user page and the way you're able to change your password is a bit suboptimal and a bit confusing for people, as also user tests show, which are linked in the issue. See details about the usability study at groups.drupal.org at the top, as you can see. And within that issue, rather to the end, Yoroi suggested an approach with a video, and also the person who has reported the other link I've linked opened a new issue with a suggestion to introduce a general approach or pattern for confirmation for specific tasks, for example, change password or anything related. And yeah, those are basically two approaches. Yoroi is going in line within the form, and I don't know the name of the person from Xin Yuma is his username. He suggested the pattern with the modal.
Let's see, that link is the same as this one.
Yeah.
Oops, not this one,
no,
this one.
The other one, yeah. And the issue also links patterns used, for example, by MailChimp and others. And they all go with some sort of confirmation modal step.
Okay. And I think we were looking at this. It showed some mock-ups. This is a screenshot from MailChimp. What is this? HubSpot. Okay. So any comments on these modals in general, whether Drupal should have a standard confirmation step? I guess this is something that Ralph and I were talking before the others got on. Drupal does have a confirm form, but that's sort of a one-step confirmation all by itself, and it doesn't allow for further user input. It can't be inserted into a multi-step form. And the suggestion here is for that, something that can be added to an existing multi-step form and provides a separate confirmation step. And the suggestion is to do it as a modal. Any comments on the general idea? And is this the link to the video you mentioned, Ralph?
Now the video is I'm not, 1 second, I take a look and find it. Where it was.
Meanwhile, I'll also open up the link to the issue that Christina mentioned.
I think seems like a sensible idea, I guess. I always thought it was weird that like the confirmation step or say deleting something took you to like a whole separate page and the question is in the title of the page. Like that also seemed a bit weird to me, but I get it from the perspective of like actually if you're putting that in a model, it kind of makes sense that it would be in the title. Even though it's not currently in a model, maybe that was the original intention with that, how that was designed.
Let's just here, I just spun up this page.
One detail about the user page I'm also confused about from a user's perspective. I would expect to have per default the username on top, or at least the field which is the most important identifying that user, and to have a certain order, meaning first the username, or if it's reliant on the email address, then email address at first, and then the username, and afterwards the password. But that the order is quite confusing in the current situation.
Right, so this is a live site running locally with the latest 9.4. So the username is the title of the page, so it's up here, but it's when you look at form elements, the username is the third element. And the current password is up here, which is only needed if you're going to be updating either your email address or your password. So that's a pretty confusing pattern, and that's exactly what the issue is trying to address.
Yep.
So rather than have this form up here, start with the email address and the username, and I guess only when you click save, if you've changed either the email address or the password field, then it'll ask you for this information. So Ralph pasted the link to the video, and this is less than 2 minutes. So this is from the usability study, Ralph?
No, that's from Roy Scholten.
Okay.
As a follow-up to the usability meeting, as mentioned in the comment I've linked above. That's an idea he came up with afterwards.
Okay, so let's just see his mock-up.
I think we're missing the whole explanation that Roy was giving here.
Oh, I guess I can hear it, but you're saying the audio from the recording isn't coming through?
No.
So I think the visuals capture most of it. He's suggesting that we start with the form elements on the left, so name, email, and then a collapsed field for changing the password. And then when you click on this, the password field opens up. I'll pause and summarize again if I think he says more that that where the audio really adds.
Okay.
So now he said the collapsed element would have all the fields you need to change your password, but then the tricky thing is that you also need the password to change the email. He's suggesting some magic here, which I guess is some JavaScript to add fields to the form when you start editing the email. And he's saying to avoid confusion, make sure that the password field below is collapsed so that you just see the password field for the confirmation. Okay, and then he was just summarizing at the end there. Oh, darn that YouTube auto play.
I have a slightly what's the word where you go completely off in a different direction? I don't know. I feel like there's, sorry, what was that?
Just a different approach.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. I feel like I think that we could potentially design a better flow for changing the email address and changing the password, because like I'm not sure that's a thing that maybe you should be able to do it all in the same form, but I feel like that's a thing that should be separated out. And I guess the thing I'm thinking there is like, for instance, if you go to change the email address, we have an issue running for getting a long running issue for sort of sending a confirmation email. And then you have to confirm that email address change. Like, I think that feels like a separate workflow to change the password. And there's an argument that sort of keeping those things separate is, I guess, maybe good for security, because then it's becomes a little bit more tedious to change the password and the email address. Like, I don't know, that's just kind of off the top of my head, but I feel like we could sort of address it with maybe, like if you see like other sites, for places, I'm just thinking like off the top of my head, like Google, Microsoft, Twitter, they all tend to separate out into different screens. The idea of like changing your password is a separate flow and a separate set of screens to changing the email address or adding a new email address kind of thing. So maybe there's something wider about rethinking the flow of how the user edit screen works and maybe separating that out. Maybe we have like a separate, a completely separate sort of form for changing the password. It feels like a lot of things are kind of bundled into the one form because that's just the way we've always done it. Like maybe there's a better approach by separating them out. I'm just also looking at the form as it's on your screen there, Benji. So like, for instance, you on this form, you can change the email address, you can change the username, change the password, change the roles, the account picture, the account status, the time zone, like contact form settings. Like this form does a lot of things. And we of late have tried to really encourage the principle of like one form not doing too many things. And I'm also, yeah, thinking back to, again, as I said, those examples of services that quite common services that wouldn't have all of this on one form.
Yeah, so I totally agree. And actually, well, I think it's obvious where all this is coming from. Basically, this is just the edit form for a user, and that's all. And that's how we've been living since this was created, whatever version was that, and it's been working so far good enough because it hasn't been like a priority at all. But if we really start thinking about how this is done nowadays on any site, any social media site, any online store or whatever, when you are actually editing your user data, like your account or your profile or your whatever. I mean, the pattern that we can see anywhere, it's like has completely evolved from what we have here. Like this is just an edit form, and we really need different kind of forms here. So, like for example, what Benji said, like the title of the page is just the name of the user, which is like mind-blowing. Just let's put the title, what is this page? Okay, you're editing something here, but you should be at least like following the pattern for the node, like editing admin user or something like that, or editing your profile. Or I don't know, I mean, it just the edit form and it survived like this. So I think we should completely change the way we are thinking about how you edit your information. So I totally agree with not having one form that does everything, but also we probably will think about the whole form itself. Like, I don't know, following more modern patterns.
Or to put it another way, Roy's suggestion was to use a lot of creativity to design some new way of managing it, and we should try to be less creative. We should try to keep it simple.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I will keep the edit form for any user. It's just that if you are going to edit your profile, I mean, nowadays the patterns are completely different. And I think if we are coming up with a dashboard for the users to make it easier for the users, why wouldn't we think about this also?
Okay, and Ralph gave us a thumbs up in the Zoom reactions. Do we want to keep talking about this some more, or have we come to a good stopping point?
I have one last thought. It was just based on what Christina was saying, in that like maybe just for instance the tab being edit, like again is an example of it's the edit tab for the user, like from a data perspective. And if you compare it to all of the other like entities in core, like that makes sense, like you're editing this entity. But if we think about the user experience, like really that tab should be called account settings, not edit. Like if you're just a user, like, you know, you're looking for, I'm looking for the settings for my account settings, like that's what the tab should be called, not edit, you know. That's the only other thing that came into my head.
So there's a lot we can rethink here. The title of the page, the title of the tab, which elements to show on it, if we're going to have separate pages for password and email address, what's the navigation to them? Are they sub-tabs under this? And try to keep it simple. And Christina, you pasted in another link.
Yeah, so so just as context, this is an ideas issue that we created a while ago, and it's not completely exactly related to that. It's a proposal to create a menu for content editors, which will be focused on content editing. And if we are doing that for the content creation, like for editors, we are creating a new menu, an independent menu from the manage menu. We could either create a new menu for the user itself, or we could actually update the existing information architecture, meaning adding new links or adding new forms.
And just for the sake of the recording, this is issue 3203618, new content creation menu proposal.
I'm happy to keep talking along this line because I have some additional ideas that go even further big picture stuff. But if we have other issues to talk about, including this one, I'm happy to move on from the topic of like the user screen. But if we don't, there are other things I could talk about that have been on my mind.
Okay, let me just look at this link that Ralph pasted in, and I guess I was premature, and we do want to keep talking about this. And Ralph pasted in a link to the issue we talked about a few weeks ago, 2514218.
Yeah, but there is also the point with there's also the edit in secondary nav. And there, because what Aaron mentioned with settings might be also suitable there, to be honest. To have settings, manage fields, manage form display, manage display.
Yeah, I think the that tab. Yeah, I think we could. I mean, we could change it for. So it's interesting. So, like for instance, if you're editing a content item, because that's what we call Node now, I guess. If you're editing a content item, right, or like to me personally, edit makes more sense because like I'm editing a thing, like I'm viewing a thing, I'm editing a thing. Rather than like settings feels like something more like I'm changing these values, I'm changing these things. So like field settings, just as like the way an example, like field settings as a term makes sense to me, but like content item settings doesn't really make sense. I don't know how to explain that in a more concise way other than because that's how my brain perceives it, but like there's like certain times I think edit makes sense and certain times I think settings make sense, and I don't know how we distinguish it, like how we separate that in a logical way.
And I think also that the labels we have here are sort of generic things that are going to apply to a lot of different sorts of content on the site, whereas the tabs for the user field, yeah, a user's information is a particular thing that deserves special attention. So maybe you should not get the standard labels.
I also just remembered we do already have an account settings screen, which is of all things the settings, the form for changing the global user settings, like that apply across all users under configure. That's what we call account settings, and like that shouldn't be called account settings. The user edit form should be called account settings, not the like now that I'm thinking about it, like that feels like that needs a better name.
So this, of course, is something that's only going to be seen by an administrator. I forget
Yeah.
whether it's the manage permissions or manage users permission, something like that. Most users are not going to see this, so but many users will have permission to change at least some of the fields on their own account. Usually not the roles.
Could you switch to the other tab again?
This one?
Yeah. Okay, so let's see, user itself, entity.
Yes.
That's another this is another form that I think is doing too many things.
But Aaron, you also said you had other suggestions to make along the lines of the user form.
Yeah, well, I think, and it's just by coincidence that we're talking about this, because I never intend, what I'm going to say, I never intended to bring up, but it kind of fits into what we were saying, and it's more kind of, it's more of a sort of a thing of like when you're working with, whether it's users, like as an administrator, when you're working with whether it's users or like I suppose users is a good example. There's two contexts here. There's the context of I'm editing my own account versus I'm editing another person's account, and we have the flow is always the same regardless, right? Like you always I guess one of the side effects of that is that if you go to edit your own settings, you end up from the like the view tab of your user profile, you click on edit, you end up in the admin interface, and you click back on view and you end up in like the front end interface. And the same is the case for other aspects. Like if you're I guess if you're editing I'm trying to think of another one in core. The other examples I have are actually from a custom system that I've worked on a while back. So can't really mention here, but user is an example of that problem where you kind of end up switching context between the front end and the back end. And I don't know if the best way to solve that is by completely separating out those flows, like where if to edit your own user settings, you go to a specific part, like slash settings or something. But you know, we take we have a separate set of routes and forms for it that would live under like slash admin slash people slash user or something that are there if you're editing other people. And we make that distinction, and then there becomes a separate flow, because the way you edit users is different from when you're editing other users versus editing yourself. And this is kind of a bit vague and abstract in some ways, but I thought I'd bring it up since we're talking about it, because as I said, I have other use cases for this, but they're all in a custom solution. So yeah, can't really reference them here, unfortunately, but.
Okay, so you want sort of different information architecture, different navigation to get to pages for editing your own profile and editing other users. Is that?
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying, and I think that would make sense. It would be certainly interesting to explore it further, to see whether it makes sense for people. Like for instance, if you're on this screen and you click on one of the usernames, like you're then taken out of the administrative UI. And then if you click on edit, you go back into the admin UI. Like there's this real kind of, in one way it breaks the flow, but also like if you're a regular user editing your own account, the things we were talking about earlier make a lot of sense, like the account settings tab and separating out the password and email address and all that kind of stuff into different forms. Whereas if you're an administrator, It might actually be easier if that's all on the same form. Because if you're editing another user, you might be editing a whole lot of users at once. So you might benefit from having a single unified form like this. So it would certainly be worthwhile, I think, exploring if we should separate out those flows and what that would look like, having separate information architectures.
Yeah, I totally agree. And actually, probably as a content manager, you also manage users sometimes. So it could end up being something like that. Also, like you're actually managing content, so it should behave as the rest of the content. Whereas when you're editing your profile, it's an admin, not admin, but it should stay on the same admin interface. It doesn't make any sense that you jump into the, well, I don't know. I'm not sure, but yeah, I wouldn't expect the whole edit form, even though at the end you should be able to access there somehow as a user, but probably I would just create some new form pages that just access to this data on a different way.
I mean, it wouldn't be hard to do it because we have building blocks in core. I mean, we have other we can create separate form displays that display only certain fields. So like in theory, we could have a form display that's like my settings, and it just displays a subset of fields, and then a separate form display for like password, like these are all possible. It's just whether whether there's the will to even do this,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would see that even as a small initiative, like, because it's I would say quite contained, because if you go to the admin menu right now, you have view profile, edit profile, and logout. No, sorry, into the top one, admin, instead of manage, neither shortcuts, the admin one. Yeah, you have these three items here. Maybe just changing these items and create new forms, coming up with what should be in there. And you maybe even don't need design. You can just need wireframes and use default admin forms for that.
I guess we're looping back around actually to the content, what was it, the content creation menu proposal, because it kind of has a similar sense of like the toolbar should be able to adapt to the persona, I guess. And I guess the other challenge though is, like, the weird thing here is that most sites wouldn't give regular users access to the toolbar. Like some sites might, I guess depends on how they're using the toolbar. There's some really interesting ways you can make use of the toolbar if you're, depending on what you're doing. But most sites wouldn't give the access toolbar permission because it's perceived as a administrative interface.
That's true.
And we do have a separate user menu that sites can make use of, so yeah, there's that too.
Yeah, we have the user account menu actually.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, there is a menu, like a user menu.
Yeah.
We never, it's not even, I don't think any of the course, it's like there because it's a hangover. It was a hangover from like Drupal 6, I think, even earlier. But nowadays, core itself doesn't really make much use of it. But you can make use of it if you want to.
So we actually, what are we showing on the toolbar then? Which is the menu that is giving us.
The ones on the toolbar actually, I think, are just hard coded there. They're not generated from a menu.
Oh, cool.
Which I guess in itself is an issue. Like, why aren't those generated from the user menu?
I think.
aren't these generated from the admin menu? And then we have
Yeah.
an issue we've talked about before, to give people some flexibility and what shows up here, and maybe use the user menu
Yep.
instead of the admin menu, depending on the who's logged in.
Yeah, so the Manage tab is generated from the second level of the administration menu, but the tray you get when you click on Admin or Shortcuts is the Shortcuts one is programmatically generated, but the Admin one is just a hard-coded set of items that appear in the tray. And I know this because I had to hack the toolbar once for a project to make it do things that you wouldn't normally do with it.
So I would expect here like a link to a dashboard if we end up having a dashboard like view profile, edit profile, and log out. And probably when you edit profile in there, you probably would have like separate like tabs or something like that. I don't know. Or maybe it's not profile, maybe it's account. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure how complicated that would be to switch to use a menu, because I think that's what you're saying. Giving this flexibility to the site builder probably would give a lot of power here. And I don't know.
There's contrib modules that allow you to add other menus to the toolbar. It's it's definitely possible to expand what the toolbar can do.
Should this end up as an core idea, so other people can jump in and actually give some insights about what's the technical problems, what are the technical problems that we can face here, and what's the background here, or I don't know, something like that? Do you think it would make sense?
Yeah, I guess it depends what because we've kind of covered like 10 different topics in this meeting at the moment. So like, I guess it depends what we're even proposing, you know.
Good point.
But for a lot of what we talked about, I'm sure there's like, you know, there's issues there for, like we touched on, for the content creation menu, and from that that'll probably, you know, that means modifying the toolbar. Like, I guess, obviously the user stuff that we talked about is a separate thing, but it's kind of related.
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying the ideas issue, because I mean, just discussing each of these things on separated issues, you really don't discuss all the other things. And I think to make a call, it should come together.
Yeah.
Like it goes together somehow. I don't know. Like a broader discussion.
So I'm not sure what the scope you're suggesting is. So let's, you know, of course, first look to see maybe there's already an issue on the ideas queue, but if not, then what is the scope of the issue you're suggesting?
I don't know. Just came up to my mind, so I really don't know. I guess probably it could be like, so what I like thinking it fast, it could probably be if we have to add a menu specific, or add or reuse a specific menu for the account itself, what items should go in there, how it could be technically solved, and what will go on these items, these links that we will put on the account, like the edit form for the profile, or really new pages. And I think it's a whole discussion that goes together.
Yeah, and there's another related one, which was to add an add button to the toolbar, which is it's slightly confusingly titled, but it's basically to add a button to the toolbar that's labeled add, and it gives you a quick way to add things like nodes or media or that kind of thing. And that's, again, it's another related issue. I think we're kind of coalescing around like make the toolbar better, basically, is and make the user pages better. Just like make it easier to use if you're a non-admin user.
Yeah, but anyway, so I think the easier way to see that account new menu or whatever will be in the toolbar itself. But as you were saying, if we have this as a menu, it could become a block tool, and you could place that anywhere on the admin interface, not just either on the admin interface or in the front theme also. So it wouldn't be something that is completely related to the toolbar, rather more a way to edit your own account, well, a user account, meaning that it's not, so it's kind of related to make the toolbar better, but I would focus more on making or improving the way you edit your own information.
Yeah,
So
for
it
sure.
sounds like what Christina is suggesting is getting back to what we started with.
Exactly.
And so check to see whether there's already something on the ideas queue. We are getting close to the end of the hour.
Yeah.
So
we could discuss this another day, probably.
So navigation, so some of the ideas we talked about before, on redesigning the edit page for, not this one, for this one, the edit page, the title, the navigation, splitting it up into separate pieces. And some of that might involve a new or expanded menu. Some of that might involve changes to the toolbar. And I know we already have several issues related to the toolbar. Maybe we should also have something about that on the ideas queue. But we're getting to the point, the time where I'd like to identify some concrete next steps, like who is willing to look at the existing ideas queue and either comment there or create a new issue. And what will the scope of that be?
Yeah, I think we probably, instead of, we need to search on the ideas issue, but we also need to define what we want to put on the ideas issue. So probably we will need further discussion. I know I don't want to take a whole UX meeting for that, but probably we would need to get into an agreement first about what we want to put in there. So I'm not sure if now we have enough next steps other than taking a look and being sure that there's nothing like this yet or already. Yeah, go ahead, Ralph.
One suggestion in that regard: why not everybody is looking at the ideas queue until, let's say, next week or the week after, and then we have a discussion about the scope of the proposal for the ideas queue, so that everybody is taking a look and make up his own or her own mind, so we can have an informed discussion about the steps getting into the idea.
Yeah, we could even, my next step, we could just start a Slack thread and start to collect ideas.
Yeah.
And see where we get to.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Hey Benji, remember 50 minutes ago when you said we might cut the meeting short?
Yes, I do remember that. Thank you for reminding everyone. Okay, so I guess we don't have anything too concrete here, but we will continue the discussion. I think I'll have some time today. I will at least look through the issues queue and comment in Slack. And We still have 5 minutes left before the end of the hour. Let me just briefly look at the issue that Christina mentioned early in the meeting. So this is 3251278. It's a meta issue. Designs for dark background layers and its color palette. Do you want to say anything more about it, Christina, or just bring it to our attention?
Yeah, it's basically, well, so I just want to let you know that this is has been open, and because it's also related to UX, it's for the Claro theme. Basically, as a context, Claro has designs and colors and the palette set for light and white background or lighter backgrounds, but we don't have anything yet for the dark regions, like the toolbar, sorry, like the tour, for example, or the off canvas, like for Leo Builder, for example, or something like that. And there was an issue that was saying that we had an accessibility issue. It was also on 7, an accessibility, an issue for 7. And we created we fixed that on 7, and it needed to be fixed on Claro. And the problem that we faced is that using the default Claro blue, as you can see at the top, it obviously doesn't have enough contrast with a dark background. And that's normal because on a design perspective, you always need a palette, a different palette for darker situations, like dark regions. And this is probably an issue that needs to create like child issues. I created the tour, the new designs for the tour, the off canvas ones, but we probably need either a research or at least to have that in mind if we end up on a situation where we face this problem somewhere with a dark region. Like, for example, I think workflow or workspaces also might end up having issues with that. So at least all of you know this exists. And that was all. Just FUI, we created this.
How close is Claro to being declared stable? Is that going to happen?
Yeah. Well, so we need to have that done by June, and that's a huge thing. There's let me find the stable roadmap.
Yeah, I guess it's not really any of my business, but I'm sort of worried
obviously
that this is taking us.
This is a huge. Yeah, I know.
And maybe this should be postponed, but again, that's.
I mean, it's an accessibility problem. As long as we have the palette, we can just fix the blue, and it wouldn't become a blocker.
Okay, so this is considered a blocker to stability.
On an accessibility perspective, that for sure. And the thing is that I'm not sure if Tor is enabled by default. I'm not sure how we can avoid adding more work into Claro's work that still needs to be done. The main problem that we have here right now is that we have like 6-7 issues that are really, really long and like that are big ones, and we are not able to, or nobody wants to jump in and take the time because it's spending a lot of time there, and they just lie there without anybody taking the time to move them forward. Like the small ones, they have been fixed in most of the situations, but like the contextual and the toolbar and smaller variations, for example, or the prefix and suffix, they are issues that they don't have that much movement because those are huge issues, and that's the main problems that we're facing.
Okay.
And when we are stable, then we still have some other things to do before becoming the default admin thing. There's another issue for that.
Okay, but we have reached the end of the hour. Just for the sake of the recording, the issue we're looking at now briefly is 3066007, the roadmap to stabilize Claro. So thank you all for coming. As I said, I will do some follow-up today and at least look at the issue queue and comment in Slack. And we'll do this again next week. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.